Boom! I snap awake, gasping. Another explosion. Closer. Something's burning. I throw off the sheets and bolt for the door, heart jackhammering in my chest. I rip the door open. Holy fuck, my truck, my 18-wheeler, my entire goddamn livelihood. It's drowning in fire. Not just burning, screaming. Flames rage like starving beasts, tearing through the cab, devouring the tires, swallowing every last thing I worked my ass off to build. A blast of heat slams into me, so violent it rips the breath from my lungs. No, 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 no! I stumble forward. The rain pounds against my skin, but it might as well be gasoline. This isn't stopping. Boom! A tire explodes. Shrapnel whistles past my head, embedding itself in the porch behind me. Smoke chokes the air. My fists clench so tight my nails cut into my palms. This isn't an accident. My stomach drops as reality slaps me across the face. Someone did this. And then, through the flames, I see it. A goddamn sign. A smug, laminated HOA violation notice pinned to my burning fence. A warning, a message from her, Karen Whitmore, that power-drunk, prune-faced bitch from the HOA. She's been gunning for me since the day I moved in. Your truck is an eyesore, she whined. It doesn't belong in our neighborhood. So she burned it. She torched my rig, my livelihood, the only thing putting food on my family's table, my vision tunnels. Blood pounds in my skull. My hands shake, not from fear, not from shock, from pure, seething, unrelenting hatred. She thinks she won. She thinks she can get rid of me. She has no idea what she's just started. By the time the firefighters arrived, I was soaked through, my clothes heavy with rain and ash. Neighbors lined their porches, some clutching umbrellas, others gawking at the carnage. One firefighter pulled me aside, shaking his head at the charred remains. "Accelerant was used," he murmured grimly. "Arson, no question." My chest tightened. Who would do this? I recalled the endless arguments with Karen, the HOA president who had hounded me non-stop for not joining her association. Still, I never imagined she'd go this far. After the flames died down, the fire chief patted my shoulder in sympathy, but the weight of that touch felt more like a warning. Whoever did this wouldn't hesitate to strike again. The morning after, I was still trying to scrub soot from my hands when the doorbell rang. Standing there, in a crisp blazer and a smug smile, was Karen. She sighed theatrically. "Heard about your truck," she said, voice dripping with false concern. "Such a shame. If only you'd joined the HOA, maybe we could have helped you avoid accidents." My teeth clenched. "My property's never been under HOA rules," I growled, ignoring the tremor of rage in my voice. "You can't force me to sign." She leaned in, her eyes gleaming with cold triumph. "Accidents happen to folks who don't cooperate, but you still have time to change your mind." And then she left, heels clicking on the wet pavement. I stood in my doorway, heart pounding, realizing I was now public enemy number one in her twisted little kingdom. The next morning, I sat on my front porch, gripping my coffee so hard the mug nearly cracked. My truck, what was left of it, was still sitting in the driveway, a burned-out skeleton. Every time I looked at it, my blood boiled all over again. The smell of melted rubber and charred metal still clung to the air, a constant reminder of what had been stolen from me. Rebecca stood beside me, arms crossed, her face tight with worry. "We can't let her get away with this," she said, her voice shaking. "She won't," I promised. But the truth was, I didn't know where to start. Karen had the HOA wrapped around her finger, and the police weren't exactly eager to dive into a neighborhood dispute. I needed evidence, something concrete to prove she was behind this. My first step was getting security cameras. I installed them around the house, making sure every angle was covered. If Karen or her minions so much as set foot on my property, I'd have proof. By noon, I had a plan. My friend Jake, a fellow trucker, loaned me his old rig so I could keep working. It was a battered beast, the paint peeling and the seat springs shot, but it ran. That night, as I parked it in the driveway, I made sure to check the cameras. If Karen thought she could take another shot at me, she'd find out just how wrong she was. The next morning, I got my first hit. The footage showed a shadowy figure creeping up to my truck in the dead of night. The quality wasn't perfect, but I could make out something in their hands. A hose. Gas siphoning. My hands clenched into fists as I watched the video over and over. Someone, no, Karen, was trying to bleed me dry, one drop of fuel at a time. Rebecca gasped when she saw the footage. "You have to take this to the police." I hesitated. The police hadn't exactly been helpful so far, but this was solid proof of criminal activity. I grabbed my phone and dialed. An officer showed up later that afternoon. He watched the footage, nodding along, but his response was lukewarm at best. "Hard to say who that is," he said, scratching his chin. "Could be a random thief. You got any real proof it's someone from the HOA?" I ground my teeth. Who else would be doing this? My neighbors? The mailman? This isn't just a coincidence. The officer shrugged. "We'll make a report, but without a clear ID, there's not much we can do." That night, as I locked up the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on my own. The next few days, I kept my head down and worked. Every time I left for a haul, I worried about what I'd come home to. The sense of paranoia never left me. Karen wasn't just harassing me, she was trying to grind me down inch by inch. And then she escalated. I came home late one evening, exhausted from a long haul, only to find my truck sitting lower than usual. My gut twisted. I grabbed a flashlight and knelt down, slashed tires, all four of them. I felt a red-hot wave of rage crash over me. My fists shook. My breath came fast and ragged. This wasn't just intimidation, this was war. Rebecca stood behind me, eyes wide with fear. "You need to call the police again." I did. They arrived an hour later, took some photos, wrote another useless report, and left. No promises, no real action. I could almost hear Karen laughing from her pristine, manicured lawn. I stormed across the street, pounding on her door. It swung open slowly, and there she stood, her usual smug expression in place. "Oh, dear," she said, feigning concern. "Trouble with your truck again? How unfortunate." I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth ached. "Cut the act. I know it was you. You think you can run me out?" She tisked, tilting her head. "Run you out? No. But I did warn you, didn't I? Things would be easier if you just joined us. You wouldn't have to deal with these unfortunate incidents." A sharp laugh escaped me. "You think slashing my tires is going to scare me into paying your bogus fees? You're insane." Karen's smile faltered for a fraction of a second before she leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "You might want to reconsider your attitude. You're making a lot of enemies, and it would be such a shame if things kept happening." That was it, the direct threat. No more pretending, no more polite intimidation. I took a slow step back, my mind racing. She thought she was untouchable, that she had the power to make my life a living hell. But she had no idea what she had just unleashed. She had declared war, and I was ready to fight. I barely slept that night. Every creak of the house, every rustle of wind outside had me sitting up, gripping the baseball bat I kept beside the bed. Rebecca lay next to me, stiff as a board, pretending to be asleep. I knew better. By sunrise, I was out in the driveway replacing the slashed tires. Every movement felt like a battle, a refusal to let Karen win. My hands ached from tightening lug nuts, but I welcomed the pain. It kept my anger sharp. By midday, I had a plan. I needed more than just my own word against Karen's. I needed witnesses. So I started talking. First, I went to Nate. He had a short fuse, but he had a good heart. When I told him about the gas siphoning and the slashed tires, he swore under his breath. "This is straight-up sabotage, and the cops aren't doing a damn thing?" "Not a thing," I said. "But I bet I'm not the only one she's screwed over. I need proof, statements, anything that links her to this harassment." Nate rubbed his jaw, thinking. Then he pointed down the street. "Talk to old man Willis. Karen's been at his throat for years. He's got stacks of letters from her threatening fines for stuff like grass too tall and unauthorized holiday decorations." I wasted no time. Willis, a wiry man in his 70s, opened his door cautiously. The moment I mentioned Karen, his lips pressed into a thin line. "She's a damn snake," he muttered, motioning me inside. "You want to see something?" He led me to his kitchen, where he pulled out a folder so thick it barely closed. Inside were years of violation notices, threats of fines, and legal jargon designed to scare homeowners into submission. "She fined me for leaving my porch light on past midnight," Willis scoffed. "Said it was light pollution. Called the city, and guess what? There's no such rule." I took pictures of everything. This was gold. Over the next few days, I visited more neighbors. Story after story piled up. Karen had fined people for basketball hoops, for flower pots, even for parking their cars facing the wrong direction. And it wasn't just fines. She had spread rumors, sent anonymous complaints to workplaces, even threatened people's jobs. By the end of the week, I had gathered nearly a dozen statements. Some folks were still too scared to go on record, but even without them, I had more than enough to build a case. Then Karen struck again. I came home one evening to find a thick envelope taped to my front door. Inside was a formal letter from a law firm claiming I was being sued by the HOA for defamation and harassment. My jaw clenched. This was her counterattack. Rebecca's face went pale as she read the letter. She's suing us. Can she even do that? I exhaled slowly. She can try. I knew exactly what I had to do next. It was time to call Thomas. Thomas arrived at my house the next morning, briefcase in hand, and an expression that told me he wasn't surprised. He flipped through the legal papers Karen had sent, scoffing at every page. "This is laughable," he muttered, shaking his head. "She's accusing you of harassment after everything she's pulled. She doesn't have a legal leg to stand on." I exhaled, tension coiling in my chest. "So what do we do?" Thomas smirked. "We counter hard." For the next hour, we went through everything I had gathered. The security footage, the police reports, the violation notices Karen had sent to me and half the neighborhood. When I showed him Willis's stack of documents, his eyebrows lifted in approval. "This is exactly what we need, a pattern of abuse. We're not just going to fight this lawsuit. We're going to expose her for what she really is." That same afternoon, Thomas filed a response, not just denying the HOA's claims, but launching a counter-lawsuit. We accused Karen and the HOA of harassment, defamation, and illegal property damage. The moment the paperwork was officially served, I knew Karen would see it as an act of war. And I was right. That night, my security cameras caught something. 3 figures approached my house, moving low, dressed in dark clothes. They spread something across my lawn, laughing as they worked. When I checked in the morning, my stomach turned. My entire yard was covered in garbage. Rotten food, torn papers, even broken glass littered my driveway and grass. On my front door, spray-painted in bright red, were the words, "Get out." Rebecca gasped when she saw it, her hands covering her mouth. "Oh my God." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "They're getting desperate. That's a good sign." I called the police, and to my surprise, they actually took it seriously this time. Maybe because I now had security footage. Officers arrived, took statements, and promised an investigation. Karen stood on her porch the entire time, watching with a smirk. She wanted me to know that she wasn't done, but neither was I. Thomas was at my house within the hour. He grinned when he saw the footage. "This is exactly what we need. We're adding vandalism to the charges. And now, the police have no choice but to take this seriously." Rebecca sighed, rubbing her temples. "I just want this to end." I placed a hand on her shoulder. "It will, but not until we bury her." I refused to let Karen think she had the upper hand. If she wanted to escalate, then so would I. But legally, where she couldn't slither out of it. The morning after the vandalism, I drove straight to the police station and handed over everything: security footage, reports, statements from neighbors. The officer at the desk gave me a tight nod. "We'll assign someone to this. Looks like more than just a neighborhood dispute." That was the first real sign that Karen had pushed too far. Meanwhile, Thomas got to work. He filed an emergency motion to demand a full audit of the HOA's financial records. If Karen had been misusing funds, this would expose it. Then came the best part. Our lawsuit was officially moving forward. The court date was set. Karen had a limited amount of time to respond, and knowing her, she'd scramble to find a way out. But I wasn't waiting for her next move. I visited every single neighbor I knew had been wronged. Some were hesitant, others were eager to talk. By the end of the day, I had 8 signed statements detailing Karen's abuse of power, fines for no reason, intimidation tactics, even fraudulent charges on HOA bills. That evening, as I sat on my porch, I felt the weight of what we were doing. This wasn't just about my truck or my family anymore. It was about taking down a tyrant who had been untouchable for too long. Then, late that night, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. "You're making a mistake," a woman's voice whispered. I sat up straight, gripping the phone. "Karen," she laughed softly, "you're playing with fire. I can make this all go away if you just drop your little case." I let silence stretch between us, then said, "See you in court." She exhaled sharply and the call cut off. I had rattled her, and that meant we were winning. The phone call from Karen was exactly what I needed. It confirmed one thing: she was scared, and that meant we were closing in. Thomas wasted no time. The next morning, he submitted the latest evidence to the court, including the police report on the vandalism and the harassing phone call. "This is good," he told me. "She's panicking, which means she's bound to make mistakes, and when she does, we'll be ready." I kept my cameras rolling and my eyes open. The neighborhood was buzzing now. Word had spread about the lawsuit, and suddenly people who had been silent for years were speaking up. My phone was blowing up with messages from homeowners detailing Karen's reign of terror. Fines for things like holiday decorations, complaints about pets, and even threats for using the wrong kind of mailbox. Then something big happened. Nate called me late one evening, his voice urgent. "Dude, you're not gonna believe this. I know someone who used to do work for Karen." I nearly dropped my phone. "What do you mean, work?" "She paid guys under the table to mess with people. You know, petty crap, messing up yards, moving trash cans, slashing tires. Nothing that could be directly tied to her. But I got a name. And this guy, he's willing to talk." This was a game changer. I met Nate's contact, a jittery man named Kyle, in a parking lot the next day. He looked nervous, constantly checking over his shoulder. "Karen paid me to mess with your truck before it burned," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not the fire. I had nothing to do with that. But she told me to make your life difficult." I slashed a tire, dumped some trash. It was just a job, man. But when your truck went up in flames, I knew I had to get out. I recorded every word, and when he finished, I asked, "Would you testify to this in court?" Kyle swallowed hard. "If it keeps me out of trouble, yeah. I don't want any part of this anymore." That was it, the missing piece. When I brought the recording to Thomas, he grinned. "This proves intent. She didn't just make your life hell. She paid people to do it. This isn't just HOA abuse anymore. This is criminal." We took everything to the authorities. Now, Karen wasn't just facing civil lawsuits. She was looking at real charges. Fraud, harassment, even conspiracy. And with Kyle's statement, there was no way she could weasel out of it. 2 days later, a squad car pulled up to Karen's house. I stood on my porch watching as she was led out in handcuffs. Her face was red with fury, her mouth moving fast, but I couldn't hear her words. Maybe she was still trying to threaten her way out of this. Maybe she was blaming me for her downfall. I didn't care, because for the first time since this nightmare started, I knew it was finally over. Karen's arrest sent shockwaves through the neighborhood. It was like someone had cut the strings of a puppet master, and all her carefully built control came crashing down. Some of the board members tried to distance themselves immediately, claiming they had no idea about her underhanded tactics. Others disappeared, staying quiet as the fallout unraveled. But I wasn't done yet. With Karen behind bars awaiting trial, it was time to dismantle the entire corrupt system she had built. Thomas pushed forward with a civil lawsuit against the HOA. We demanded full financial records to uncover exactly where the homeowners' fees had been going. The deeper we dug, the worse it got. Karen had funneled thousands into personal accounts, using HOA funds for security, which, as Kyle had admitted, meant paying people to harass homeowners like me. But that wasn't even the worst of it. The city began investigating permits and found that several of the HOA's past projects, like the beautification fund that fined homeowners for the slightest imperfection, were completely fraudulent. It was all a scam to extract more money from the neighborhood. The board scrambled to cover themselves, but it was too late. The judge ruled that the HOA was in violation of multiple state laws, and a formal injunction was placed to freeze all their accounts until a full audit was completed. The neighborhood was on fire with gossip. People who had once stayed quiet out of fear now spoke freely. Stories of intimidation, extortion, and outright theft flooded social media. The HOA's official page was bombarded with angry homeowners demanding their money back. Then, The final nail in the coffin came. The county tax office released a statement confirming that, due to improper documentation, the HOA didn't actually own the land they claimed for community projects. This included a large park, several sidewalks, and even the common areas where Karen had enforced strict rules. In short, the HOA was a paper tiger. It had no real power anymore. With Karen in jail and the board crumbling under legal pressure, there was only one logical step left: dissolve the HOA entirely. At the next emergency meeting, now led by interim board members who wanted nothing to do with Karen's regime, homeowners voted on whether or not to keep the HOA. The result was nearly unanimous. Willow Creek Estates was officially HOA-free. I walked out of that meeting with my head held high. It wasn't just about winning against Karen. It was about proving that bullies like her could be taken down, that standing up, even when it seemed impossible, was worth it. Rebecca squeezed my hand as we left, our neighbors smiling at us, thanking us. For the first time in a long time, I felt peace settle over the neighborhood. But even as we celebrated, I knew one thing for sure: Karen wasn't the type to go down quietly. Karen's downfall should have meant the end of everything, but I knew better than to relax. Even in jail, people like her found ways to reach out, to manipulate, to keep their claws dug in deep. And I was right. A week after the HOA was officially dissolved, I found an envelope shoved into my mailbox. No return address, no postage, just my name written in perfect, looping cursive. I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper with only 4 words: "This isn't over yet." Rebecca found me standing in the kitchen staring at the note with my jaw clenched so hard it hurt. "What is it?" she asked, concern lacing her voice. I handed it to her. She read it, went pale, and set it down like it might catch fire. "It's her." "Or someone acting on her behalf," I muttered. I checked my cameras. Nothing. Whoever had delivered the letter had done it fast and clean. No movement on the footage, no shadow lingering near the mailbox. Either they knew about the cameras, or they had someone on the inside feeding them information. I called Thomas immediately. He wasn't surprised. "I figured she'd have a few tricks left. I'll push for a no-contact order." But I wasn't about to sit around waiting for more threats. I needed to know how Karen was still pulling strings. I started digging. One of my neighbors, Alyssa, had a sister who worked at the county jail. She wasn't allowed to share much, but she let something slip over coffee one afternoon. "Karen's been getting visitors," Alyssa told me. "Not family, just some lawyer types. But one guy stood out, tall, bald, dressed too nice to be just an attorney. Looked more like a fixer." That set off alarms in my head. Karen wasn't just sitting in a cell, wallowing in her losses. She was planning something. Then another incident happened. One night, just as I was getting home from a long haul, I noticed a car idling near the curb. The engine was running, but the headlights were off. It didn't belong to anyone in the neighborhood. I parked my truck and got out slowly, my pulse steady but my gut tight. The second I started toward the car, it peeled away, tires screeching against the pavement. I memorized the plate. The next morning, I ran it through a contact I had in law enforcement. The car was registered to a private investigation firm. Karen had hired someone to watch me. That meant she was still playing the game, and if she thought I was going to back down, she had another thing coming. I spent the next few days keeping track of everything. The car returned more than once, always late at night, always parked in different spots. It wasn't just surveillance, it was intimidation. Karen was sending a message, even from behind bars. I wasn't the only one noticing strange things. Alyssa called me one evening, her voice tight with nerves. "Someone's been knocking on my door late at night. When I check, no one's there. My cameras keep catching motion, but no clear image. It's creeping me out." I promised her I'd look into it. But first, I needed more than just a plate number. Nate, ever the hothead, had an idea. "Let's spook 'em right back," he said, a wicked grin spreading across his face. "I got some trucker buddies willing to do a little recon of their own. See if they can follow this PI and find out where he's coming from." It was a risky move, but I was done playing defense. If Karen was sending people to watch me, I wanted to know exactly who they were. 2 nights later, Nate called me, his voice low and excited. "We got him! Your guy drives out to an office building just outside city limits. Small firm, nothing fancy. But here's the kicker. Guess who their biggest client is? I already knew the answer before he said it. Karen. Bingo. She's paying them through some business associate, probably trying to keep her name off the books, but it's her, no doubt. This was it, the proof I needed. Even locked up, Karen was pulling strings, trying to manipulate the system, trying to keep her grip on the neighborhood. I brought everything to Thomas, who nearly laughed. She's dumber than I thought. Hiring a PI while under criminal investigation? That's tampering. If we can prove she's intimidating witnesses, she won't just be looking at HOA fraud, she'll be looking at serious federal charges. That was the moment I knew, without a doubt, that Karen had finally sealed her own fate. I wasn't just going to beat her in court. I was going to make sure she never got the chance to do this to anyone else again. The realization that Karen was still pulling strings from behind bars didn't surprise me, but it infuriated me. She had lost her empire, been arrested, and yet she still found a way to make my life miserable. I wasn't going to let it continue. Thomas wasted no time filing an emergency motion with the court, citing Karen's attempts at intimidation and witness tampering. The fact that she had hired a private investigator to watch me while facing criminal charges was the final nail in her coffin. This isn't just a desperate move, Thomas told me, tapping his pen against his desk. This is stupidity, and it's going to cost her. I hoped he was right, but Karen had already proven she wasn't afraid of playing dirty. 2 nights later, another envelope appeared on my doorstep. Just like the last one, it had no postage, no return address, just my name. I opened it carefully, expecting another vague threat, but this time it wasn't words. Inside was a single photograph, grainy, black and white. It had been taken at night. It was a picture of me sitting in my truck. Chills ran down my spine. They weren't just watching my house, they were watching me. Rebecca saw the photo and nearly dropped it. "This has to stop," she whispered. "We have to get out of here." I exhaled, trying to keep my rage in check. That's what she wants. She wants me scared. She wants us gone. But we're not leaving. That night, I parked my truck in a different spot and kept my lights off. If they wanted to watch me, I'd watch them right back. It didn't take long. At around 2 a.m., a car crept down the street, slowing near my driveway. My camera caught it, and so did I. I stepped outside, bat in hand, letting the porch light flicker on. The car hesitated, then sped off into the night. I called Thomas first thing in the morning. "They're getting bold. This is harassment." "Good," he said without missing a beat. "The more they push, the worse it looks for her case. Keep logging everything. Every note, every car, every phone call. We're building a case of intimidation now, and that's going to guarantee she never walks free again." Later that day, Alyssa knocked on my door. Her hands were shaking. "Someone's been calling my house," she whispered. "Blocked numbers. They don't say anything, just breathe into the phone, and it's always at night." That was it. I told her we needed to take this to the police. Karen wasn't just coming after me. She was trying to intimidate anyone who had spoken against her. We met with an officer that evening, laying out everything. The threats, the notes, the photos, the phone calls to Alyssa. The fact that a woman sitting in jail was somehow still terrorizing people. This time, they listened. The very next day, the prosecutor added new charges against Karen, witness intimidation. That meant a harsher sentence, less chance of parole, more time behind bars. I could almost hear Karen screaming from her cell. She had finally lost control. But just when I thought it was over, something happened that changed everything. That night, my security cameras picked up movement in my backyard. Someone was there, and they weren't just watching. They were coming inside. The second my cameras detected movement in my backyard, I was on my feet, heart pounding. I grabbed my bat and moved toward the back door, pulse steady but adrenaline surging through me. Whoever was out there wasn't just watching this time, they were pushing their luck. I glanced at the monitor again. A shadowy figure moved between the trees, their outline barely visible in the dark. Then, a flicker of light, a flashlight aimed low, scanning the yard. This wasn't some random trespasser. This was intentional. I flipped the porch lights on, stepping outside. I don't know who you are, but you've got 5 seconds to leave before I make you regret stepping foot on my property." The figure froze. Then, instead of running, they turned and bolted toward the fence. I sprinted after them, just in time to see a dark car peel away from the curb, tires screeching. I memorized the license plate in an instant. Thomas wasn't going to believe this. The next morning, I handed over the footage and the plate number to the police. This time, they acted fast. Within hours, they traced the car to a known associate of Karen's attorney. That was the final straw. The prosecutor immediately filed a request to revoke Karen's right to any outside communication. She was officially cut off. No more lawyers feeding her information. No more private investigators watching me. No more phone calls. Nothing. And just like that, her empire, her ability to manipulate from behind bars, was gone. Days passed, and the silence was deafening. No more notes, no more cars idling near my house, no more strange phone calls in the middle of the night. Then, the best news yet, Karen had taken a plea deal. Faced with mountains of evidence, including witness intimidation, HOA fraud, harassment, and vandalism, she had no choice. If she had gone to trial, she would have lost spectacularly. Instead, she accepted 10 years in prison. When I heard the news, I sat in my truck for a long time just breathing. It was finally over, but the real satisfaction came during her final court appearance. The courtroom was packed. Neighbors who had suffered under Karen's reign of terror showed up to see justice served. I sat in the front row, arms crossed, watching as the judge read out the list of her charges. Karen stood there, her once perfect posture slumped, her confidence gone. The same woman who had smirked at me, who had threatened me with her fake power, now looked hollow. When the judge officially handed down her sentence, I saw her hands tremble. 10 years, no parole, no escape. She had ruined so many lives, and now she had to face the consequences. As she was led out of the courtroom, her gaze met mine for a brief second. There was no more arrogance, no more smugness, just the look of a person who had finally realized she had lost everything. The neighborhood started healing. People came together, fixing what Karen had tried to destroy. There were no more fines, no more threats, no more fear. The air even felt different, lighter, as if we had all been released from an invisible weight pressing down on us for years.